Welcome to another edition of This Month at the TNM. This month, we'd like to look at things that the organization is doing to accomplish our goal of an independent Texas. Recently, Executive Director Nate Smith spoke at a conference for TNM leadership members. There, he outlined a roadmap for success. Let's listen to what he had to say.
One of the things I want to get into is the roadmap to victory for the TNM. How often does our legislature meet?
Every 2 years.
Does every state do that?
Nope.
No. What does the federal government do?
All the
They
time.
either never meet or they're always meeting, right? I mean, it's hard to tell because they don't get anything done, which is what I pray for. When they do get something done, oh Lord, look out. But they're continuously in session, much to our detriment. So if we look at the really big picture for TNM and what it means for us to get to the success, to secure and protect the political, economic, and cultural independence of Texas, and to restore and protect the constitutional republic, I know I need to do that we've got a lot of things we need to accomplish, right? We went over the legislative and the bills and actions we've taken that cover every part of that mission earlier. From Bowie knives to gold depository, right? Cultural, economic, fireworks, cultural, recognition, monitoring, protection, all the way to filing 1359, which goes into the political side of our mission, right? So what is the single biggest accomplishment? And we've already talked about it in terms of what we need to do next. What is the big thing that we're looking to do in order to make this happen? Close. That's a big part of it, right? In order for it to be successful.
Election integrity.
Yeah, that's what Rhonda said. So obviously that's a key that has to go hand in hand with this, but ultimately it's the Texas Independence Referendum Act. We need a referendum, a vote of the people, in order for this to transpire. All of these things put us in the middle of this cycle, and we need to understand that, like we talked about with the progress and how long it's taken over the years, that, we're not guaranteed to win in the next session. We're going to do everything in our power to make it happen, to get the Independence Referendum Act across the finish line in the 2023 legislative session. That's when the next one is, right? But it's not guaranteed to happen. So that means that the work that we do and the way that we plan and build and grow the organization is around making sure that we can hit them cycle after cycle and grow each time. And one of the importances to the success of this is indeed running candidates, influencing candidates, right? So talking about this legislative session, and we just saw this with the TTB and stuff like that. So the legislative session starts when? The next regular one?
Spring.
January of 2023 is the next one. When do those people get elected into office? In November. But November is the general election, right? And the winter election is really decided in Texas. Primary, with the exception of very few races that are already all allocated. So now we're talking, so when does that election come in? It's in March, almost a full year ahead of the actual session, right? And when do people start running for that March session?
Before that.
Yeah, I mean, we saw most of the campaigns in the fall, right before the spring primary, right? And that's kind of the typical campaign season, right? Which happens to be immediately after the previous legislative session, right? So it runs in this full cycle. But one of the things that we know as we look towards this is that we need to be moving that longer and longer out. It's important for us to recruit candidates and announce their races and what they're running even further ahead of time. When is our best opportunity to get this referendum passed, right? We said that already, the 2023 legislative session. There could be a special session called by the governor. We know that that is unlikely, especially given the governor. But in the right conditions and the right processes, that could happen. Obviously, as an organization, we want to be prepared for that, and we certainly want to be leveraging pressure to make that happen at any time. But it's not guaranteed, right? So Our focus is on success in the regular sessions, but we of course prepare and put pressure for a special session as well. Now, when is the best time to actually hold the referendum itself? Exactly. We want it in the off year. So
An odd number a year.
an odd number a year.
Why?
Like, so for example, that would be not this November, where we have not presidential election, but we still have the gubernatorial candidates on the ballot, right? But next year, immediately following the regular session, what will be on the November ballot? Does anyone know?
Constitutional amendments.
That's it. Constitutional amendments. Nobody runs for office in that November election. So what that means is the amount of influence and desire to manipulate election results is drastically diluted because our referendum will be the dominant thing on the ballot, right? And people are focused on that. Now, yes, it does mean a lower turnout, but as we know, people are going to show up and vote for this regardless, right?
The people
Texas
that
is
want
going to
it.
bring them out, and more likely, people that really want to vote. You kind of don't want the people that show up in general elections to vote because they're looking for a straight ticket and all the other reasons where they're low information voters going into the polls and casting a vote, right? We want people there because they're either for it or they're against it. So this is the reason our target. So you'll find that our bill was crafted in the 1359 was crafted to put it on the ballot last November. My mind's straight. Last November, which would have been a constitutional one in 21, right? So it's the November right following the session. That is the ideal target for us.
What is that again? The ideal target is when?
The November immediately after the regular session.
Odd
That is-
year.
odd year,
November
23 will be our next opportunity for it. We have the 23 regular legislative session, and we have the 23 November right after that, right? So then the next one after that would be the 2025 legislative session and the November following. With that being the case, where we have a regular session where we're most likely to get the referendum passed, and the following November, that's a very short time frame between when we know we're going to have a vote and when the vote actually occurs. Right? And we know that if we're put to a vote today, it's going to win, assuming the results aren't manipulated. We know we don't want to win by a little, we want to win by a lot. Right? And given the things like the Brexit referendum, where you saw, was it about 53%, I think, win, it was very, very close. We don't want that. We want a 60% plus blowout, and in the words of James White, we got to win beyond the margin of theft. So we really want to go further than that. That means we have a very short time period between the time that the bill is passed to call a referendum and the actual referendum itself. This is good and this is bad, right? The good thing is the opposition does not really exist today in a concrete way, right? There's not an anti-Texit movement out there. We know there's a lot of organizations that are against what we're doing, but they're not totally formed against us. So they're not going to be prepared in forming their organizations until the last minute. This would be the Remainers, or more popularly the Remoners, in the Brexit, right? They had a last minute where they put it together, whereas those in favor of Brexit had already been building for years and years in support. We have the advantage of that. But it also means that we've got to impact a whole lot of people in this next time period. And so with our goals being around 2023, both passing it in the regular session and then of course having and winning a referendum after that, there's going to be a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of people we need to get in touch with and bring to this. But in this big picture thing, the other thing that we want to continue to do is work with and grow those relationships with the legislatures and identify those that are already in support of it. Because not only are we trying to place candidates, but our window to put the candidates that we want in office for this next session has closed. The ones that we can work on are the ones for 2025 from a candidate standpoint. So that's what Take Texas Back, our PAC, is designed to do, is to start recruiting candidates for that now. It's a long cycle. I'm hoping by the time that they go through the 2024 primary election season and take office in 25, we've already had the referendum, we've already voted in favor of it, passed it, and that when those people take office, it's their job to go negotiate so that we don't end up in a situation like Britain did with a leadership that didn't really want to implement the results of the people. So understand, like, this is a cyclical thing and it builds. We've got a lot of steps to do that's a part of this. And the other thing is, if they do not pass it in the 2023 session, right, and we don't have the vote then, Well, then the candidates that we're recruiting, we need to actually go ahead and pass the bill first. So there's a lot of steps that come into this. As we mentioned earlier, election integrity is now key. It's more key. We saw a lot of anomalies and things to question in the 2020 election. We saw social media come right in with the banhammer and say, you're not allowed to talk about it, or question it, or look at it. And I gotta admit, I was even caught by surprise with what happened in this primary, because not that I think Texas is immune from election irregularities and suspicious things, but this occurred in a party primary. The things that we saw that were suspicious was within the Republican Party. It wasn't the Democrats coming in and jacking with them, right? It's not the Republicans jacking with the Democrat primary. It was within the own party's primary. It's the establishment protecting the establishment. Obviously, we know there's a lot of work to do, and after lunch, we're going to get an update from Claver on what we're doing with the election integrity, but we know that has to go hand in hand. And so that's going to play right into what we're doing in the 2023 session. Not only do we need to pass the Texas Independence Referendum Act, we're going to need to pass legislation to oversee that and do some other activities that are relevant to it. The last thing in the big picture view of this is things that can bring more attention to it. So we made this, a petition effort in the last year, and we had the tremendous results we talked about earlier from it. But there's going to be a time to play it again. So when's the next time that petition can take effect? If we were to be successful at it, run the petition again, put it on the ballot, when is the next time it would appear on the ballot? The 2024 primary election, which is likely in March.
Oh,
Right, that is, so if we have the petition again, there's a 6-month window from when we start collecting and we have to have them done.
well, that's what
And we force it on the ballot. The next time that we can force it on the ballot is going to be the 2024 primary election,
That's
right?
right.
And again, perfect world, we meet all of our goals, we'll have already had the petition. But it's still a powerful tool. So we're looking at where to use that again, because one of the other things that we want to do, even with the petition, even if it's going to be much later out that it actually goes on a primary ballot, if we get signatures and they know it's going to be on the primary ballot in March, and we do that ahead of time, we may be able to apply pressure next year during the legislative session to just go ahead and pass it and give us a real referendum. So, and there's a few other petitions. I know Daniel hinted at it on Coffee Talk, but there is some other means to petition in Texas to put it on a ballot, a general ballot, not a party ballot, but it would not be statewide. So we're researching and looking into that. One thing that we know in order for a petition to be successful is that we need a little more resources overall to pull that off. We had a tremendous amount of people that volunteered. We're growing the human resources side of it, the people that are participating, growing the local groups and having all these. This is a tremendous part of it. But as you know too, there's a lot of financial resources that go into promoting the petition. And so that's one of the things that's factoring in our decision of when and if we do the petition again, as well as making sure that it's strategic so that when those results are tabulated, it's going to apply the right pressure to the right people at the right time. But that is the big picture success and cycles the TNM goes through, especially around the referendum and the legislative side. What this means, though, is the use of the political parties and our interaction and work with them. It is a tool for TNM to use to accomplish our mission, but it is not the tool, right? And it has limited power and long time for results, almost as long as some of our legislative work with them directly. So it is something that we continue to use, but it is not going to be a primary strategy for us, right? We want to work with them, we want to advance certain things within the party, we want to fix things, but the other half of this is the last good poll that we have that I can quote, but it was the poll around, it was the 2014 one at the time of the Scottish referendum that gave a good political breakdown of who outright supports Texas leaving the Union. And does anybody remember what those percentages are? Because Daniel spots any other C's in the room? Any other compliant personality? Remember those statistics?
It was like 65 to 75 across the state.
68.
That was the more recent one.
Yeah.
But this one going back that gave us an actual party breakdown. It was 54% Republicans at the time. We know that's higher now. Because yeah, the southern states was 66% that happened in July. where they grouped us in with others. But 54% of Republicans, half of independents, and 35% of Democrats back then. One thing we got to keep in mind as representatives of the TNM, as leadership in the TNM, is this is not a Republican organization. While we very much lean conservative in our values, and Texans do as a whole, and we reflect that, understanding that we need to make sure that our language is not focused on Republican alone. It's not even exclusively focused on conservative alone, because we're going to need that 35% of the vote or more from the Democrats in order to win this outright. Remember, Democrat doesn't mean that they're Beto O'Rourke or that they're Joe Biden. Having a person that identifies and votes as a Democrat, I think we already discussed a little bit earlier, that people used to do that because with their upbringing, what they believe, they were told Democrat represents the working people, or Democrat represents people of color, and the Republicans are the opposite of that, right? So it doesn't mean that the people have values that they share with what we see as the big US-wide Democrat platform. But understanding that there are Texans that identify as Democrat and believe that they're Democrats, and if you come and only talk about Republicans, they're going to get a bad taste in their mouth right away, right? And they're going to ignore what we're about and what Texas is about and TNM is about. And so we need to make sure that we have a broader appeal, and especially as we're speaking in front of groups, we get up to speak to the public, that we are using, I hate to use the word,
Neutral language.
Equitable language.
I was going to say inclusive, but I know that's a trigger word. But yes, neutral language that can appeal to the broader group of Texans that are frustrated with this system, that are, you know, what is the biggest differentiating factor in what TNM stands out for? Does anybody know, like, what, if you were to define the us versus them of the TNM, what is the us versus them?
Less government.
Individual freedom.
It is
And
Texans versus the federal government, right? So that is the us versus them, and that is the language we need to try to use over and over and over again, and that will give us that more of a neutral speak and not isolate people who don't already identify as conservative or Republican, but allow us to reach to a broader market of Texans going like, you know, one of my favorite sayings that Daniel had was, this is about Texans and only Texans deciding what's best for Texas. You have that conversation with somebody because they're expecting, they got anything in their, number of things in their head, what they think the Texas nationalist movement stands for. And you go tell them that, and they're like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Why should we let people from California or Colorado decide what's best? But let's talk about some specific action points that need to occur in the next 2 years for us to make major progress with our mission milestones. So in March of 2024, what is one of the things that we definitely said would need to happen in March 24? I'm going to work our way backwards so you kind of get the
Need our candidates to win.
Exactly. As many candidates as we can, from the schoolhouse to the state house. I want to say doghouse or something. From the schoolhouse to the state house, we want candidates to run at every level of government and get on the ballot. And we need people, this is one of the things we want to do is, as in our local groups, is identify people now to sign up and be a part of it. Because if you launch your campaigns now, well, and when everybody else has, there's way more power, time to build and learn off of it. The other thing that we would like to have in March of 2024, especially if we don't get the other referendum that we want, would be the primary ballot referendum. Preferably on both party ballots, but we'll see about that. But we want referendum primary ballots, and that's our next opportunity for it. So then in November of 2023, what do we want then?
The question on
The referendum. That is our target. It doesn't mean we're going to hit it, but that is our target right now. I put this disclaimer on because I don't, it's not a promise. And we have to make that clear when we communicate that to our people. And so when we set a goal, what do we want? Text it now, right? But it doesn't happen now. Things have to happen, and we have to accomplish actions in order to get there. So I put that as a disclaimer. But obviously, we're doing everything in our power right now, and our efforts are to get us that referendum in November 2023. The one thing we didn't talk about, we're going to go into a little bit more, but the other thing that has to happen in order for that vote to count and be counted is not only the supporter identification part that goes into it, making sure we have yes votes, we have a massive number of election volunteers that we need to recruit to help at integrity. We're going to go into some more details I'm gonna throw this 35,000 number at you right now. We need 35,000 election volunteers helping us maintain election integrity during this Texas referendum that's gonna happen in November of 2023. And in order to get that referendum in 2023, what is the major milestone that has to occur prior to that?
Be legislation.
Exactly, the bill has to be passed in the spring of 2023, that legislative session. Not only the Texas Independence Referendum Act, but we also need our election integrity legislation, right? Because we've got to make sure that we have secure elections for it to count.
That's it for this month. We appreciate your attendance today, and we look forward to seeing you again next month.